I never thought the dumbest war of my adult life would start with tire tracks in my front yard. I mean, nobody wakes up one morning and says, yeah, today I'm going to become the kind of man who keeps a legal folder about grass. But the first time I saw those muddy grooves sliced across my lawn like somebody had dragged a plow through it, I had this quiet little feeling in my stomach that said, this is not going to be the last time. My name is Ethan Miller, and at the time I lived on a corner lot in a small neighborhood outside Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The kind of place where people wave from their driveways, pretend they remember your name, and then immediately go back inside before the conversation turns into anything real. I bought that house after my divorce, which is probably why I got a little too attached to it, if I'm being honest. It was not a mansion, not even close, just a two-story blue-grey place with old gutters, a cracked patio, and a front yard that wrapped around the side like it was trying to give the house a little breathing room. But it was mine, and after years of splitting everything down the middle, bank accounts, furniture, holidays, even friends, there was something almost holy about having one patch of earth where I could say, this belongs to me. I take care of this. So I did. I put work into that yard like a man trying to prove he was still capable of building something that stayed put. I ripped out the patchy crabgrass the previous owner had ignored, brought in fresh topsoil, laid down Zollesia sod, planted 2 young river birches near the side stretch, and spent more money than I should have on a sprinkler controller that I could run from my phone, which my brother called the saddest midlife crisis he had ever seen. He was not entirely wrong. Some men buy boats, some men get tattoos. I got excited about soil moisture levels. But every morning when that sprinkler system kicked on and the sunlight caught the mist over the grass, I felt a little less like everything in my life had come apart. That yard became part of my routine. Coffee in one hand, hose nozzle in the other. Walking the edges before work, checking for weeds like they were personally enemies. And because it was a corner lot, there was one long open section along Briarwood Avenue. No fence, no hedge, just a clean sweep of grass running beside the street, open enough that people sometimes cut across it when they were walking dogs, and that never bothered me much. A shoe print is not a crime. A kid chasing a soccer ball is not the end of civilization, but a pickup truck. A full-size pickup truck with oversized tires and a driver who knew exactly where the curb ended and my property began. That was a different story. His name was Ray Callahan. He moved into the Tan Ranch house next door about 8 months after I did, and you could hear him before you saw him. Big red Dodge Ram lifted higher than necessary, exhaust loud enough to make birds reconsider their life choices, and a personality that matched the truck pretty closely. Ray was not cartoon evil, and I want to be fair about that. At first, he was just that guy in the neighborhood who talked a little too loud, laughed a little too hard at his own jokes, and had a way of standing in your driveway like he owned half of it. He worked in roofing or contracting, or some business where every conversation eventually became about how nobody knew how to work anymore. The first week he moved in, he waved me over while I was edging the sidewalk and said, "Nice place, man. Real tidy," which sounded friendly until he added, "You must have a lot of free time." I laughed because that is what you do when you are not sure whether somebody's insulting you or just bad at conversation. For a while we were fine, not friends, not enemies, just neighbors with different operating systems. Then one Friday evening in late May, right after I had mowed, I was standing in the kitchen making a sad little dinner for one, grilled cheese and tomato soup, because apparently divorce turns you into a 9-year-old with bills, when I heard that truck coming down Briarwood. It had this low, chesty rumble that made the windows give a tiny buzz. I looked up just in time to see Ray swing around the corner, cut across the side of my lawn with his front tires, then his back tires, and roll straight into his driveway like that strip of grass had been installed for his convenience. I just stood there, with the spatula in my hand, watching the last bit of his truck disappear behind his garage, and honestly my first reaction was not rage. It was confusion. You know when someone does something so casually wrong that your brain tries to help them out. Maybe he misjudged it. Maybe he was avoiding a pothole. Maybe the sun was in his eyes, even though the sun was behind him and I was clearly negotiating with myself like a fool. The next morning, I walked out with my coffee and saw the damage. 2 tire marks, dark and ugly, pressed into the soft ground near the young birch tree. One rut deep enough that the sod had folded up at the edge like a rug. I crouched there for a minute, touching the torn grass with my fingers, and I remember feeling embarrassed by how much it bothered me. It was grass, sure, but it was also Saturday morning. And instead of enjoying the thing I had worked for, I was kneeling in my yard repairing damage caused by a grown man who could have turned his steering wheel 6 inches later. Still, I fixed it. I tamped the soil back down, watered it, brushed the blades upright, told myself grown men do not start neighborhood drama over one bad turn. Then the next Friday, he did it again. Same time, same rumble. Same lazy diagonal cut across my side yard. Except this time I saw the whole thing from the living room window. And this time there was no pothole, no traffic, no excuse. Just Ray taking the fastest line from the street to his driveway because my lawn made the turn easier. I opened the front door, stepped onto the porch, and for half a second I thought about calling out, just saying, "Hey, don't do that," simple as that. But he was already out of the truck, phone to his ear, laughing at something, not even glancing back at the damage. So I swallowed it. I told myself I would catch him another time, face to face, neighbor to neighbor, no beat production. And then, like clockwork, it happened a third Friday. That was the one that changed the temperature in me. I was in the garage that evening, sorting old paint cans I'd been meaning to throw away for months, when I heard the truck. I did not run to the window this time. I just stood still and listened. The engine slowed. The tires bumped over the curb. There was that soft, crushing sound of rubber pressing into wet soil. And then the truck rolled away like nothing had happened. It is strange, the moment when annoyance becomes clarity. I did not yell. I did not march over there. I did not do the dramatic neighbor thing where you point at the ground and both men pretend the conversation is about grass when it is really about respect. I simply walked outside, looked at the fresh tracks, and felt something in me go quiet, because by then it was not a mistake. It was not carelessness. It was a decision he had made 3 times. And maybe the reason he kept making it was because nothing had happened the first 2 times. That night, instead of fixing the ruts, I went back inside, opened the camera app for the little security system I had installed after the divorce, mostly because sleeping alone in a house takes some getting used to, and there it was, in perfect color. Ray's truck cutting across my lawn, timestamp blowing in the corner like a witness that never got tired. I watched it once, then again, then saved it to a folder on my laptop. The next morning I took photos from every angle. Wide shots, close shots, a shot with the curve and frame, another with the property pin visible near the birch tree. Then I grabbed a tape measure and recorded the depth of the rut like I was investigating a crime scene, which, yes, felt ridiculous, but not as ridiculous as being the only person paying for someone else's laziness. By Sunday afternoon, I had 3 dated clips, 3 sets of photos, and the repair estimate from a local landscaping company for $52. I typed up a polite note, painfully polite, the kind of polite that has teeth under it, explaining that his vehicle had damaged my lawn on 3 separate Fridays and asking him to stop using my property as part of his turn into the driveway. I did not threaten him. I did not insult him. I just attached the photos, listed the dates, included the estimate, and put the whole thing in an envelope. And when I slid it into his mailbox that evening, I remember thinking, well, there, that should be enough for any reasonable person. The problem was, I was not dealing with a reasonable person. I was dealing with Ray Callahan, and by the next Friday, I was going to learn exactly how little that envelope had impressed him. The next Friday came with the kind of calm that makes you feel stupid for being nervous. Like maybe you imagined the whole thing bigger than it was. Maybe Ray had read the note. Maybe he had rolled his eyes, tossed it on his kitchen counter, and decided, fine, I will turn like a normal adult now. I even tried not to watch for him, which is a lie people tell themselves right before they spend 20 minutes pretending to fold laundry by a window. Around 6:15, I heard the truck before I saw it. That same deep rumble coming down Briarwood, and I remember standing there with a towel in my hands, thinking, come on man, just take the turn wide, just do the smallest decent thing. But he did not. He came around the corner, dipped over the curb, carved across my side yard, and slid into his driveway with the same lazy confidence as before. Like my letter had been less of a warning and more of a suggestion he had considered and rejected. That was the exact second something changed in me. Not loudly, not in some heroic movie way, but quietly, like a door closing. I did not go outside. I did not wave my arms. I did not give him the satisfaction of seeing me upset. I just saved the footage, labeled it 4th incident, then went out the next morning with my coffee, my phone, and a little yellow notebook I'd found in the kitchen drawer. The kind you usually use for grocery lists or passive-aggressive notes to yourself about buying paper towels. I measured the rut, took pictures, wrote down the time and date, and added $52 to the running total. $156 by then. Not life-changing money, not even close, but enough to stop pretending it was nothing. That Monday, I mailed him a second notice, this time certified, because slipping the first one into his mailbox had felt neighborly, and neighborly had apparently failed the entrance exam. The letter was still calm, still factual, still cleaner than my mood deserved. It said his vehicle had again entered my property and caused visible damage to the lawn, that I had video documentation and photographs, that the cost of repair now totaled $156, and that I was requesting payment and immediate cessation of the behavior. I loved that phrase, immediate cessation of the behavior. It sounded like something a school principal would say to a raccoon. A few days later, the green receipt came back signed, not by Ray, by someone with a quick scribble that looked like maybe his wife, maybe his teenage son, maybe a person being held hostage by bad handwriting. Either way, somebody in that house had received it, and still, the next Friday he did it again. By the fifth time, I stopped thinking of it as a neighbor problem and started thinking of it as a pattern. Patterns are funny because once you see one, it makes you feel a little less crazy. The first time, you question yourself. The second time, you get annoyed. The third time, you wonder if it is personal. But by the fifth time, you stop wondering and start collecting. Friday evening truck, Saturday morning photos, Sunday afternoon, back up the video. Monday, mail the notice. It became a routine I hated, and also, weirdly, trusted. My brother Luke came over around week 6 to help me move an old workbench out of the garage, and when he saw the folder on my dining table, thick already, with printed photos clicked into sections, he just stared at it for a second and said, "Ethan, buddy, this is either very smart or the beginning of a true crime documentary." I told him it could be both. He laughed, but then he walked out to the side yard and saw the ruts for himself, one fresh track overlapping the older scar, the grass trying to heal under the repeated weight and losing the argument. His expression changed. "Okay," he said quieter now. "Yeah, that would tick me off too." That helped more than I expected, having somebody else see it and not immediately reduce it to grass, because that was the part that kept bothering me. Whenever I imagined explaining it to someone, I could hear how silly it sounded. My neighbor keeps driving over my lawn. Boo-hoo, call the suburbs police, but when you are the one kneeling there every Saturday, fixing the same damage caused by the same person in the same place, the smallness of it starts to feel like the insult. It is not a disaster. It is not a felony. Nobody gets rushed to the hospital because a man cannot make a driveway turn. But it is this tiny theft of peace over and over. And at some point you realize the thing being damaged is not just the yard. It is your ability to feel at home on your own property. Around week 7, I ran into an older man named Mr. Alvarez who lived 2 houses down and walked a small white dog named Potato, which was honestly the best thing about that street. Potato was shaped like a throw pillow and had the attitude of a retired judge. Mr. Alvarez paused at the curb while I was taking another round of pictures and said, "He's still cutting that corner." I looked up. "You knew about that?" He gave me a look like I'd asked whether weather existed. "Before you bought the place, that side lot was empty for a long time. Ray used to swing through it whenever he came home with his trailer. People told him once or twice, but nobody owned it. Not really, so he never cared." Then he shrugged, tapping gently as Potato tried to assassinate a dandelion. Some folks do not stop doing a thing just because it is wrong. They stop when it becomes expensive. That sentence stayed with me. I wrote it down later in the same yellow notebook, not because it was legally useful, but because it felt like the whole story in one line. Some folks stop when it becomes expensive. After that, I got more precise. I pulled the survey from the file cabinet, the one I had paid for when I bought the house, and made copies. I marked the property line in red. I included a county parcel map with every notice. I took wide-angle photos showing the curb, the lawn, the driveway, the birch trees, stake, the exact path his tires kept taking. I even placed 2 small landscaping stones near the edge of the grass, tasteful little river rocks that looked harmless enough but made the boundary visually obvious. Ray drove around one the first week, then over the other. The second week, cracking it clean in half. I'm not proud of how long I stood there looking at that broken rock, but I will say this. If a man can make you feel personally offended on behalf of a stone, he has achieved something special. That incident added another $34 to the total. Because yes, I kept the receipt, and yes, I included it. By week 10, the amount had climbed past $500, and the folder on my dining table had become a binder. A real binder with dividers, dates, printed screenshots, copies of signed delivery receipts, repair estimates, photos of the damaged sawn, and one very dramatic picture of the broken river rock that Luke said looked like evidence from a landscaping murder trial. I started calling it the Grass Files, which made me laugh every time and also made me realize I might need hobbies that did not involve documentation. But the truth was, the process kept me calm. If I'd walked over there after every incident, I probably would have lost my temper. And Ray seemed like the kind of man who could turn any conversation into a chest bump if given the chance. Evidence did not raise its voice. Evidence did not get baited. Evidence just sat there, meek and patient, waiting. The strangest part was that Ray started acting like he knew, not admitting it, not stopping, but knowing. Sometimes, when he pulled in, he would pause just a little before cutting across, like his brain had tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hey, maybe do not do the thing." And then some other louder part of him said, "Nah." Once, I was outside watering the birches when he came home, and he slowed at the corner, window down, one elbow hanging out like he was posing for a truck commercial. Our eyes met. For a second, I thought he was going to turn properly. Instead, he smiled. Not a big smile, just a tight little sideways thing, and rolled over the grass so slowly I could hear the wet soil squeeze under the tires. That was the first time I knew it had become personal for him too. Before that, maybe it had been convenience, maybe habit, maybe the ghost of that old empty lot when nobody told him no. But that smile, that little smirk through the open window, told me he understood exactly what he was doing, and worse, he thought the whole thing was funny. I went inside shaking, not with fear, with that hot, bright anger that makes your hands feel too light. I wanted to walk over there. I wanted to bang on his door. I wanted to say every sentence I had been swallowing for 10 weeks. Instead, I opened the laptop, downloaded the footage, paused on the frame where he smiled, took a screenshot, and added it to the binder. That became notice number 11. By notice 13, the total was $778, because the repeated damage had spread beyond the original rut, and the landscaping company had updated the repair estimate to include soil leveling along the side strip. I knew Ray had received the letters because the receipts kept coming back signed. I knew he had seen at least some of them, because one Saturday morning, while I was trimming the birch tree, I heard him across the driveway mutter to another guy, "Can you believe this clown is billing me for lawn scratches?" Lawn scratches. That was what he called them. I almost laughed out loud, because there is something darkly impressive about a man standing 15 feet from the evidence and still trying to rename it into innocence. But I said nothing. I just clicked a small branch, let it fall into the yard bag, and kept working. The 14th incident happened on a cloudy Friday evening in August, the air heavy and damp, the kind of evening where the whole neighborhood feels like it is holding its breath before a storm. I was on the porch when Ray came around the corner, and this time I did not hide the fact that I was watching. I stood there with my arms crossed, not aggressive, not dramatic, just present. He saw me. I know he did. His truck slowed, the front tire reached the curb, and for one beautiful half-second, I thought maybe this was the end. Maybe he was finally bored of being ridiculous. Then he gave the wheel that familiar lazy turn and drove across my lawn anyway, right in front of me, like a dare. The back tire sank deep near the birch, deeper than before, leaving a dark gouge through the softened soil. He parked, shut off the engine, and walked into his house without looking back. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the storm beginning to roll somewhere in the distance, and I remember thinking, all right, Ray, if this is the game you want, let us finish it properly. Monday morning I sent notice number 14. The total was $742. I included every delivery receipt, every dated photo, every estimate, a copy of the survey, the parcel map, and a one-page summary showing each incident in order. At the bottom, I added one line I had not used before. If this matter is not resolved within 7 days, I will pursue recovery through small claims court. I read that sentence 3 times before printing it. It did not feel dramatic. It felt overdue, and 2 days later, just after dinner, there was a knock on my front door. Heavy, sharp, the kind of knock that already has an attitude. I opened it, and Ray Callahan stood on my porch with one of my certified letters crumpled in his right hand, his face red, his jaw tight, and his pride written all over him like a warning label. He lifted the envelope slightly and said, "You really want to do this over a strip of grass?" And I remember looking past him at the side yard, at the rut, still dark from the rain, then back at him, and thinking, no, Ray, you already did. I looked at Ray standing there on my porch, holding that crumpled certified letter like it had personally insulted his family, and for a second I had this strange little urge to laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because after 14 Fridays, 14 tired tracks, 14 envelopes, 14 chances to be a decent neighbor, he had finally walked over to talk, and somehow in his mind he was still the offended party. He shook the letter once and said, 7 days. Small claims court. $742. Are you out of your mind? His voice had that hard edge men use when they are trying to sound in control but are really hoping volume will do the work. Facts cannot. I kept one hand on the door and said, "No, Ray, I'm pretty sure I've been very organized." That made his face tighten. "It's grass, Ethan. Grass. You're acting like I'm backed through your living room." I nodded slowly, because I had expected that line, or something close to it. "You're right. It is grass, and it is also my property, and you've driven over it 14 times after being told to stop." He gave this sharp little laugh, the kind with no humor in it. "Told to stop? You mean these little lawyer letters? You could have come over like a man. That one almost got me. I will admit it, because nothing makes a man more eager to do something stupid than another man questioning whether he is one. But I had spent too many weeks building the case to throw it away for a porch argument, so I stepped back, opened the door wider, and said, "Come here. I want to show you something." He hesitated, probably because he expected me to puff up, not invite him into evidence night. But pride is a curious animal, and has followed me right to the dining table. The binder was already there, thick and ugly and honest, with the grass files written on a piece of tape across the spine because apparently even during a neighborhood dispute I was still capable of embarrassing myself. Ray glanced at it, then at me, and muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." I opened it to the first tab. "May 24th, I said, sliding a photo toward him. Front tire entered the side yard at 6:17 p.m. Back tire follows, 2 ruts near the birch tree. Estimate $52. He did not pick up the photo. He just looked down at it like it might bite him. I turned to the next section. May 31st. Same path, same damage. Then the next, June 7th. Then another, June 14th. After the 4th one, he said, "All right, I get it," but I did not stop, because that was the whole point. He had gotten it weeks ago and done it anyway. I turned the pages slowly, not dramatically, just steadily, letting the dates stack up in the room until even his anger had to make space for the pattern. Then I opened my laptop and played the clips, one after another. His red truck rolling over my lawn in the clean, indifferent language of video. At first, he stood with his arms crossed, chin high, still wearing that look that said this was all beneath him. By clip 6, his jaw had stopped moving. By clip 9, he shifted his weight and looked toward the window instead of the screen. By clip 11, the one where he smiled through the open window while driving across the grass, I paused it. That freeze frame sat there between us, his little smirk caught in the blue glow of the laptop, and I said, "This is the part where it stopped being convenience." He stared at the screen, then looked at me, and for the first time all evening, his voice came out lower. "You were recording me," I said. "Ray, you were driving across the front of my house. That is usually where cameras point." He swallowed, annoyed because he knew that was true. Then he tried one last doorway out. "You put rocks there. You were trying to trap me." I leaned back in the chair and looked at him for a long second. "I put 2 small landscaping stones on my own property to mark the edge of my own yard, and you drove over one of them." He opened his mouth, closed it, then rubbed one hand over his face like the conversation was finally becoming heavier than his pride. Outside, the rain had started again, soft at first, ticking against the windows and making the dining room feel smaller. I remember the smell of wet soil coming in from the open door, and the weird quiet after weeks of engine noise, like the whole house was listening. Ray finally pointed at the binder and said, "So what do you want, Ethan?" And that question, after everything, almost sounded tired. I closed the laptop halfway. "I want you to stop driving over my lawn. I want you to pay the $742 in documented damage, and I want this to be over." He scoffed, but it was weaker now. $700 for grass. I said. 7:42. He looked at me sharply, and I could tell that tiny correction irritated him more than any insult would have. Maybe because it proved I had counted every bit of it, every Friday, every rut, every dollar. For a moment, I thought he might explode, tell me to sue him, storm out, make the whole thing messier. Instead, his shoulders dropped just a little. Not surrender exactly. More like the math had finally reached a number his ego could not afford. He picked up the crumpled letter, smoothed it once against the table with his palm, and said, "I'll bring it by." No apology, no admission, no handshake, just that. Then he walked out into the rain, crossed my porch, and went back to his house, and I stood there watching him through the window with this strange, hollow feeling in my chest, because winning a fight you never wanted does not feel like people think it does. It does not feel heroic. It feels quiet and a little sad, and mostly like you are relieved nobody made it worse. 3 days went by, then 4. By the 5th day, I had already started rehearsing small claims court in my head, which is never a healthy hobby. I imagined explaining the binder to a judge, imagined Ray rolling his eyes, imagined myself becoming famous in the worst possible local Facebook way. Man sues neighbor over grass, comments divided. Then, on the 6th morning, I opened my front door and found a plain white envelope tucked under the rocker mat. My name was written on it in thick black marker. No note, no apology, no cute little neighborly olive branch, just cash. Counted exactly $742. I stood there in my slippers, holding that envelope while the sprinklers clicked on along the side yard, and for the first time in almost 3 months, I felt my shoulders loose. That Friday evening, I heard Ray's truck at the usual time. I had told myself I would not watch, which of course meant I was at the window before the engine even reached the corner. The red Dodge came down Briarwood, slowly near the curb, and for 1 second my whole body braced for the same old diagonal turn. But this time, Ray stopped. Not fully, not gracefully, but enough. He turned the wheel wider, backed up once, cursed so loudly I could hear it through the glass, and pulled into his driveway the correct way. All 4 tires staying on pavement like a miracle of modern transportation. I laughed then, just once. Not because it was funny, but because after all that, the solution had been there the entire time. 6 extra seconds and a little respect. The grass healed eventually. The birch tree survived. Ray and I settled into the kind of neighbor relationship where a nod means both hello and let's never discuss this again. Maybe that is not the warm ending people want, but it is the honest one. I did not need him to like me. I needed him to understand the line. Sometimes people call that petty. And maybe there is a version of this where I walked over on day 1, had one firm conversation, and saved us both a lot of paper. But here is what I still wonder. If someone keeps taking something small from you, over and over, after they know it belongs to you, is it still small? Or is it just the easiest kind of disrespect to get away with? So I will ask you what I asked myself more than once. Was I wrong for letting the evidence build and making Ray pay every dollar? Or did he earn that bill one Friday at a time? Drop your honest take in the comments, because I know some people will say I went too far, and some people will say I did not go far enough.